Morning all. There was a very interesting game in round 3 of the Gashimov Memorial. Okay, so let's see Nakamura playing white against Mamedyarov playing black. I'm experimenting with this wide format, trying to make the board a bit bigger than last time. The result of the game is not showing anymore, so hopefully there's a little bit of tension if you haven't seen this game before especially. So let's see, Nakamura kicks off with e4 and Mamedyarov plays the Caro-Kann c6, and if we use live book here we'll see they follow the main line almost. Now knight c3 is the main line. e5 is popularized by Nigel Short, the advance variation. So bishop f5, knight f3. Bishop usually goes to e2 here. After e6, yes, we do see bishop e2, not wanting an exchange of light square bishops. There's a classic game, Nxg5 against Capablanca once, with this exchange, and Capablanca totally outplayed Nxg5 positionally on the light squares, and there was a rook infiltration later. It was actually covered in this channel if you want to see a classic game. But putting the bishop here creates other issues for black, like congestion of the king side pieces. It's a bit more difficult to develop pieces, although it looks as though black's structure is like a French defense with the bishop outside of the pawn chain. But these other subtle issues are not too insignificant. So knight d7 is the main move here, but c5 was played by Mamedyarov instead, and we see bishop e3, and the main move is c takes immediately. So we see 370 games here in live book, but Mamedyarov chose queen b6. Is this slightly riskier? Just for those interested in the theory here, let's follow c takes as an example. Usually games follow like this, and you see that black eventually, I think, can reach a position where he's about to develop his king side pieces and castle, so it'll be a bit like that. Okay, so let's go back to the game. So in the game we see, instead of c takes d4, queen b6, and here the main move is knight c3, so it introduces knight b5. This pawn is a bit of a poison pawn. Pawns on b2 are often well, sometimes labelled poisons, like in Sicilian defence as a poison pawn on b2. So is black really threatening to take this? Well, it's meant to be quite good for white, taking immediately, as we see with this slight advantage here. Queen takes b2, so the move apparently is just knight b5, and this is quite dangerous for black. I mean, this looks a bit ludicrous. If knight a6 here, d takes c5, yeah, this is looking as though something horrible is happening. Bishop takes queen c1, there's pressure for white, and it's meant to be a clear advantage. So okay, knight c6 was played, and now usually players with white just castle here. This is the main move. 66 games have been seen before in live book, or bishop b5, but Nakamura played d takes c5. Very interesting. So we've come off the beaten tracks quite a bit here. So taking on c5, and now knight b5. This is an interesting position. How does black react? There's actually two threats, knight d6 as well, so rook c8, that will be knight d6. So this is quite annoying. So king f8 seems virtually forced. Let's put on a Qb6 here. So king f8 is basically, it looks as though it should be about equal here from the evaluations, about equal. So what happens now? Well, Nakamura played knight bd4, so he's threatening to damage black's structure by taking on f5. And that's the most crucial issue here. So knight g7 supporting f5. White castles. And here we see bishop e4, when it gets out of the trouble of knight takes f5 if black wants to move the knight to g6. Can't do so otherwise. So bishop e4 is also useful for trying to undermine white's control of e5. But Naka now reacts with rook e1, so he's prepared to put more support on e5 in the case of bishop takes f3. Now It seems interesting. There's a plan mentioned by the engineer with h5, which is interesting to mention. If h5, so if we say c3, king g8, I think the idea is a rook h6 to g6, and this doesn't look that bad for black to play in such a manner. Say rook h6, it looks as though black has sort of manually castled, and the rook seems fairly useful here in conjunction with the bishop on e4. So this looks like a decent position for black as far as I'm aware. So bishop f1, maybe the rook doesn't even need to go to g6 immediately, or maybe it could actually be a mistake here. It seems anyway, it's a handy rook there to have, as I mentioned here. So this looks like a decent idea in the position, fairly safe for the black king, and the rook's quite active. So a very interesting idea for black there. But interestingly, I think this is kind of out of character a little bit. Black played queen b4. It seems to be going after the poisoned pawn. I do wonder sometimes, GMs can go completely, it seems, off the rails anti-positional chess, but I think the key thing is they play the exact position, and in doing so I think there's greater risk for playing moves which maybe club players will think are really mysterious. Why is black going after this pawn when the king safety doesn't seem that great? But of course, if there's no clear punishment seen, then sometimes these things seem entirely justified. I mean, is there any evident punishment for going after the b2 pawn here? If white tries to protect the b2 pawn, let's say with rook b1, black can still play h5, and this is going to be okay. But Naka didn't bother. In fact, he positively encouraged Mamedyarov to take this poisoned pawn. Well, he hopes it's poisoned. Mamedyarov hopes it's not poisoned. So a3, of course, to try and get b7, knowing that the d4 knight is actually holding c2 here. And the engine suggests don't take the pawn. Engines are, no, actually it is saying to take the pawn, pardon me. Well, there's other ideas like just moving the queen back, queen c5, but actually taking the pawn is actually recommended here. It seems a bit risky. There's the other pawn to take on rook b1 though, so yes, black will be a pawn up, but there's a rook on the 7th rank here. The evaluation isn't that great for black, and it looks as though white's going to have a much easier game after this. So it's like a classic taking this poisoned pawn here. So I guess once black's played queen b4, he has to commit to this. I mean, it looks silly to play queen b6. White could just play b4 with a space advantage, and I think with c4 later, white's going to get a nice advantage. Okay, so that'll be pretty nice. So there was no point of queen b4 if it wasn't then for taking here. I think maybe rook b1 was expected. Possibly rook b1 was expected, not a3. So Naka's saying go on. You know, he's saying take the pawn, take the pawn. So the pawn is taken. Rook b1, queen takes a3, rook takes b7. This just looks like an interesting gambit though here. What is actually going on? e5 is held. Bishop, if bishop takes, let's say bishop takes. Actually, bishop takes is played anyway. Sorry, that's the move of the game. Bishop takes f3 here. The knight can't move without c6 dropping. If the king moves, let's try just the king move in this position, which wasn't played. White might be doing okay with several moves here, it seems. There seems to be strong compensation for the pawn down already here. So black seems to play the best move. Bishop takes f3. And now knight takes f3 was played. And now it looks as though white has an intention potentially of queen d2. I mean, one of the more aggressive intentions is queen d2. It's f4. And then knight g5 just mating on f7. That's the crudest intention here. But another one is just opening up the centre with c4. Maybe even using the b file with queen b1. Or knight d4 again. So there's many ideas in this position. This is rich with ideas. But it seems one of the more dangerous ideas, queen d2 to f4 and knight g5, is kind of addressed by black's h6, trying to take away the g5 square. But queen d2 is played anyway, and now g5 taking away the f4 square, and white tries to undermine that with h4. Okay, so how does black react to this? Well, it's big trouble. There's a lot of pressure on g5. Black can't simply just protect the pawn. Let's have a quick look, because there might be an e5 thing. Just look. I don't believe this. Knight takes g5. Surely that's a disaster. Just taking here. Just knight takes e6. Queen f4 is a total disaster. Surely, yes. So basically, the pawn, it can't be protected. G takes h4 looks terrible. Just queen f4, that will concede the f4 square, and white is now threatening all sorts of things, including queen f6, bishop d3, and then queen f6, even more dangerous. So black actually plays g4, threatening the knight. The knight goes to d4, so white's still got access to the f4 square. It's also threatening bishop takes g4, given the chance. That's not insignificant. It helps hammer black's king safety. Queen a5 challenging the queen. This is blocked. Now black plays another forcing move. Knight takes d4. Queen takes d4. Not CD. We're going to lose the queen. Hitting the queen again with knight f5. So not trying to give white too much of a breathing space here. Queen d2. So bishop takes g4 is clearly on the cards here. And you might think, well, can black actually just take time to protect the g pawn? If h5, let's see what happens. Just bishop d3 here. This looks pretty nasty. If knight takes, this is going to get disastrous after queen f4. The bishop's controlling h7 as defense square. How does black actually defend this? This is showing just how disastrous it could be. So that'll be horrible. So actually d4 is played. Queen f4 looks tempting anyway, as well as bishop takes g4. These are two quite tempting moves. And it seems queen f4, there might be a downside to this. g3. I'm not taking on c3, but g3. So if taking here, queen takes c3, and there's a bit of counterplay emerging here to be dealt with. So actually that g pawn is a bit of a resource for g3. It's actually snapped off immediately, offering c3 here. Queen takes c3 is played, and now we see queen e2, and this, well, bishop takes f5 and e6 looks like the principal threat if black's not doing anything here quickly. He has to do something about this bishop takes f5. On d3 you might think, is that a useful forcing move here to play d3? Let's have a quick look at this. Queen e4, and is this pawn dangerous? d2, just rook d1. White apparently is a lot better here. So if any, like knight takes h4, bishop takes e6, this black's king safety has been shot to pieces, it seems. This is just horrible for black's king safety. There's entry points everywhere. So okay, black can't really use the d pawn here. He takes on h4 actually. The engine suggests knight e7 might be more accurate, but even so, black seems to be on the back foot after bishop h5 in any case. So knight takes h4. Now, very strong move. This is the most accurate move, it seems. Bishop h5, which Necker played, just going for f7 now, rather directly, to make use of that rook on the 7th. It's protected with rook h7. And now a very strong move again, queen e4. It looks at all sides of the board actually, not just e4. Also rook b1 would free the queen for queen takes without, if that's necessary, without queen takes e1. But queen takes h7 is of course on with queen takes e1 because that's a rook over there as well. And in fact, yeah, what does black actually do here? It seems he seems to be in big trouble. Look at the evaluations now, whatever black does. Black tried rook c8. I don't think it makes much difference now. Queen takes h7 will be played to rook d8, e8, c8. We'll just play rook queen takes h7. So rook c8 was played, queen takes h7. So offering these two guys, which seems to be useful, or this one as well with check. That's the most crucial thing. But what else does black do apart from take on e1 here, faced with this coordination on f7? Black's going to get mated. If knight g6, well, we're just going to mate black. So if there's no real defense, if rook c7, then this is a mate in 2 here, for example, like this. So black looks in big trouble. He takes on e1, takes on e5 with check. Everything else seems fairly pointless. g3. Black could try and distract white's attack. It seems pointless to just give up a piece like that. So he plays rook c7, and now a very strong forcing sequence from Nakamura. Indeed, the rook is protecting f7 at the moment, but now the king is forced in front of the rook, so the rook's not protecting f7, so that's now taken. Queen takes f7, bringing the king to d6. And now a very accurate move indeed. You see any other move, queen e8, rook d8, you see the evaluations are in black's favour here for any other move apart from what is played, which is queen f8 check. It means that bishop e8 is introduced straight away on king c6. So if king c6, bishop e8 is just winning, king d5, rook b5, and we've got control of c5 here, so it's a fantastic move. Queen f8. This is hopeless now for black. King d5 was played, and black actually resigned with this move, king d5. Of course, rook b5 is winning here, just taking the queen. There's no compensation or anything for black. He's also losing the knight, by the way, or the rook, in fact. So a bit of a disaster. It seems strange. Okay, one slight slip up with queen b4 for black, thinking that maybe rook b1 was going to be played. It seems a bit optimistic to think that rook b1 would be played, although the engine suggests rook b1, not this a3. So Naka's a3, which the engine likes after a certain depth, is the way to play it. Just make it a gambit. The king hasn't reached king safety. Black should have, in theory, it seems, my current conclusion, should have tried that idea with king j8 and h5. Just bring the rook out like this, castle manually. That seems, if you can't castle automatically, castle manually, and bring the rook out to h6, because there's no dark square bishop, so that's actually quite a nifty square to bring the rook in. But this plan just seems a bit materialistic and asking for trouble, to be honest. Perhaps best is just to retreat to b6 here. That's what the suggestion is here, and allow this b4 with it's not an entirely lost position here. And black could again think about king safety with king g8 and h5. Still revert to this plan, but it has given white an extra move. So yeah, it seems a bit as though black really played with fire in this game and got punished for it. Very strange, but it was a fantastic win for Nakamura, because it was the day after he'd been ground down by Magnus Carlsen. So to come back against Mamedyarov, who's 27.60, you know, Nakamura's 27.72 at the start of this game. He's only slightly higher rated in theory. It's a brilliant win for Nakamura in round 3. And okay, I hope you enjoyed this experimental wide format. I tried to remove the game result before to keep the tension going, and I hope you can study this video later for the variations that were shown as well on this side panel. The bold moves, by the way, are the main line moves of the game, so I think that can reduce confusion with the variations. So I hope you enjoyed this format, and if you think it might be better than just the board only, please let me know. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.